is Jerry Hoffman, and I did my presentation on the ethics of the First Amendment and how a lot of people have pushed it to the limits. The First Amendment, including the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution, is the amendment that prohibits the United States government from creating laws that would violate the American people's rights to say what they want, believe what they want, and petition for what they want. This is the one that we refer to the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, all those fun things. Of all the amendments in the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment is the most frequently abused. And another point I wanted to touch on about that is legal does not always mean ethical. Even though some things may be protected under the First Amendment, societal repercussions and consequences still exist, even if you are under the protection of the law. The first example I want to use of this is popular singer, songwriter, recording artist Eminem. Even though music isn't commonly thought of as a practical medium of communication, it's still a medium that has significant impact on society and pop culture. I think we can all agree on that. Eminem, throughout his career, has been heavily criticized for the abuse of the First Amendment in many of the lyrics and what he uses in his songs. At one point, after one of his albums, he ended up in a congressional hearing due to what he said in some of his albums. But the First Amendment protected Eminem's right to say what he wants on the album so long as the album contains a parental advisory sticker. Due to Eminem's run in Congress, he has become a pioneer for the legal limits for what can be said in songs by other recording artists like himself.
That kind of stuff's not funny.
But it is legal.
Yeah, but it's not funny.
But it's not really the government's job to determine what's funny or not. It's the government's job to determine what's legal or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you think that it's fair that less popular artists than Eminem can get away with using lyrics just as unethical, but never receive any kind of repercussion just because they're not as popular? Nobody?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
And perhaps I just missed it because I was late here. But has Eminem been punished for?
He's never been punished because the First Amendment's protected him, but he has had congressional hearings about his lyrics and songs before.
Has Congress actually done anything about it?
Well, the FCA has.
FCC.
FCC, yeah. FCC, I'm sorry. The FCC has actually, even in like the explicit versions of his album, still censored things out because they were like that. Like this one, actually, the word "dead" in that first quote I have up there, the word "dead" was censored out because the Secret Service considered it a threat to the president, so they still censored it out. But there's been other lines where the FCC has still censored them out, like things like that. But they didn't take the entire song off or like the entire lyric. But personally, I find it interesting that other recording artists can say things just as unethical in a song and they won't get censored out simply because they're not as popular and don't have as much of this impact on pop culture as Eminem does.
I don't mean to keep interrupting.
No,
but I know you want to do it as a dialogue as well, as an interactive.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the government censored some of his words?
Yes.
So then they have violated the First Amendment.
But they only did it on means of things that involve a threat.
Okay. Is that considered to be a threat? What he said, I don't.
Yes, the Secret Service specifically looked into the song and considered that line a threat on the life of the president.
So that was upheld by the courts. In other words,
if you listen to the actual album, the word "dead" in the second where I'd rather see the president dead, that "dead" is censored out.
So. Again, this is your presentation.
Yeah,
I think I now fully understand your question. So the First Amendment does not always apply.
The First Amendment applies unless it's considered a threat to national security or public safety, which was the case for that line.
Very nice.
Okay. Media attention, and for this I'm using the example of the New York Times Company versus the United States. Media attention played a large role in Eminem's case, as well as with the Supreme Court case, the New York Times Company versus the United States. I'm not sure if everyone knows what it is, but what that was the Rand Corporation held classified documents involving the Vietnam War that were called the Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg, who worked for the Rand Corporation, ended up leaking these classified papers systematically to different news sources around the country. And because they were so classified, and the Vietnam War was kind of a hot topic among the American public, President Richard Nixon tried to stop the New York Times from publishing the story. And while what Daniel Ellsberg did was definitely illegal, the question that came to the Supreme Court was whether President Richard Nixon had the right to stop the New York Times from presenting the information that was brought to them. And the one part that I found interesting about this was the media attention, and the American people put a great deal of pressure on the Supreme Court to follow the First Amendment but go against the president, which I thought was pretty interesting. What ended up happening was they did go with the First Amendment, and the New York Times was allowed to publish the Pentagon Papers. Joseph Cassano is another example. He's a New York City firefighter and the son of the commissioner of the New York City Fire Department. He posted racist tweets about hating tweets about hating his job. The fire department forced him to do a public apology as well as his resignation from the fire department. And doesn't that sound pretty legal to everyone, that he can tweet what he wants, even if it's about hating his job or if it's racist? Because it is. He is allowed to tweet what he wants. But the point I'm trying to make is ethics play a key role in the reputation of an organization like the New York City Fire Department. Employees must act as a representative of the organization that they work for. And this leads me into corporate America's unofficial clause of the First Amendment. As seniors, which we all are, I believe it's very important to understand that as an employee, you are a representative of the company or organization that you work for. Even though Cassano wasn't arrested, societal standards left him paying consequences for his immoral actions that he did on the internet. And that's kind of the beauty of the First Amendment. It's extremely open-ended, so to keep up with the constantly changing societal standards. So my advice to you would be to keep your positive reputation and keep your job, and keep the opportunity to get a job open. My final point is about Riley Cooper, who's a wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Made a lot of stirrings in the news a few summers ago when he was caught on camera using a racial slur at a Kenny Chesney concert. He was fined an undisclosed amount and was forced to leave the team for a few months. And my question for you was, do you think that punishment was enough for Riley Cooper, or was it too great? Because again, he was acting under the law, like he was protected. The police weren't coming and arresting him, but he still said something that ended up on the internet that was very damaging to the Eagles and the NFL in general.
Forgive me for adding again here, but who was he fined by?
The team, the Philadelphia Eagles fined him.
Yeah.
So do you think it was enough, or was the punishment too great?
Well, how much was it? Saying that
It was undisclosed.
It was undisclosed. Is there an estimate of what it was?
They didn't even give that. No. I'm assuming it was quite a bit though, because this made a lot of people look very bad.
Okay. So I think that I need some chat back here. Let's assume he was fined a lot of money for what he said. Is that okay?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's exactly okay, but I think it's something. I think it's.
No, I guess what I'm asking, is it okay in light of the First Amendment? He's allowed to say what he wants, right? That's what we say.
But is it okay that he's still fined?
Exactly.
And is it okay that he's still forced to leave
we
his
have
job
freedom
for
of
a few months?
speech. Why shouldn't he be allowed to say whatever he wants, right? I mean, that's your argument right there.
Well, really, it goes back to my argument on the last slide about corporate America's unofficial clause of the First Amendment, that even though what you're saying is protected under the First Amendment, you still have to worry about the reputation, your own reputation, the reputation of the organization you work for. To conclude, the First Amendment is the blueprint for the foundation of rights the American people are granted with. The First Amendment prohibits the government from creating laws limiting these freedoms, but not changing societal standards or ethics. Ethics involved in the First Amendment, opinions are relative to each individual, and Americans are free to have any opinion on anything that they would like. Some may have found Eminem's lyrics and Joseph Cassano's tweets to be very offensive. Others may have found them to be funny or very clever. The U.S. government is not in the business of distinguishing whose opinion is right and whose opinion is wrong.